folks, before we kick things off, just want to take a moment and talk about Skunk Fest. This year, we actually have 2 different cities and 3 weekends. So, if you go to skunkfestatx.com, you'll be able to check out the lineups, the dates, and locations. First on the list is San Antonio, Texas, August 21st at Fitzgerald's. Then, right after that, August 26th and 27th at Come and Take It Live here in Austin, Texas. And then a second weekend here in Austin at Empire Control Room on September 5th. Like I mentioned, if you'd like some more information on the lineup, locations, go to skunkfestatx.com. Welcome back to another episode of the Eclectic Soundtrax podcast. Tim Smolens joins us today on the podcast. He's a multi-instrumentalist, composer, recording engineer, producer, and member of bands such as Estradasphere, I.S.S, High Castle Teleorkestra, and Don Salsa. Tim's also recorded and toured with various acts such as Secret Chiefs 3, Amanda Palmer of the Dresden Dolls. Tim is also known for his elaborate, multi-layered recording, production compositions, and his keen insight into the advanced chord progressions that serve as the foundation for all the sophisticated Western music. Largely self-taught, Tim has obsessively studied the harmonic progressions and unique production style of Brian Wilson from Beach Boys fame, and successfully employed them as a distinct element in his own sound. We had a blast. Enjoy the show.
Hey, Eclectic Soundtrax. We're back with Tim Smolens. Joining us from Denver, Colorado. Mountain time, boy. Mountain boy.
It's a nice, cool 90 degrees up there.
Originally from Santa Cruz, California.
I spent a lot of time after high school. Originally from Southern California, moved up to Santa Cruz, spent about 10 years there.
Where is Santa Cruz?
It's midway up. It's about an hour and 15 minutes south of San Francisco. So in that beautiful medium of like not too hot like Southern and not too cold like Northern. It's a really, really beautiful place.
Awesome, man. And what's your background? So you're known for the band Estradasphere, and now you started a new project, and I'll let you say it so I don't mess up the name. What's going on now?
Yeah, it's High Castle Teleorkestra. Just we can get into it however you want to later, but briefly, it's a remote ensemble that started during the pandemic, where I just realized, why can't I start a band with all these really amazing, musicians that are semi-household names in the tiny little world of, prog music or whatever you want to call it that we reside in. But so I sort of handpicked them based on that. And there's 3 members of Estradasphere, myself, violinist Tim Harris, drummer Dave Murray, and we have multi-instrumental virtuoso Stian Karstensen from Norway, who plays accordion and a bunch of other stuff. He was in the band Farmer's Market, and then Bear McKinnon from Bungle and Umlaut in Australia, and an unknown guitarist from Louisiana named Chris Bogan.
Oh, okay.
We call him the Undistinguished.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. Let's back up to,
let's do it, man.
To your origins. When did you start playing music? How did that come about? And are you playing primarily bass? Because that was your primary role? I mean, all you guys played
in
multiple
bands,
instruments, but
yes, but really I get stuck doing the production. I would say that's my main thing that I'm good at. Where bass, I can play it, but it's more like a tool to finish the song. I don't sit around practicing bass. I have a pretty busy life. I work and got kids and a wife, and try to fit this in and not get into too much trouble at this point. But
back in the day, were you playing bass in the band and upright and stuff like that?
I could give you like the answer, sort of how'd you get into music. I can kind of connect it to that briefly. Saw the movie La Bamba at age 9. I think it was that Sleepwalker Johnny and Santos scene during the plane crash, but that just got me. And I was like playing guitar from then on. I went on to become this sort of like 12-year-old virtuoso. They would write about me in magazines, but I was in the hair metal phase. So I was like playing like shredding. And then when Nirvana came along, it wasn't cool to be good anymore, technically. So I switched to bass at that point because there were people making fun of me at school. It was like weird. I was like, I wasn't old enough to understand like who gives a crap what they say. So I just switched to bass. That's just kind of how that worked. And then we started a band in high school that had Jason Schimmel, who I grew up with him. He was a guitar player for Estradasphere, and he has the band Red Fiction now. He also plays with the Secret Chiefs and all kinds of stuff. He was there, and my brother Doug and a bunch of other people started this band Don Salsa, which is a pretty crazy project. It's basically like a high school homage to Disco Volante, I would call it, but we recorded a record. We were pretty lucky. We were pretty privileged upbringing. Like my dad decided to feed our music habit. Oh, you need this? You need some recording gear? Oh, you want a separate industrial space? We were very lucky. And instead of being like slacky, passing out drunk in the thing, we would just sit there and record for 24 hours in a row or whatever. And that was kind of my high school, was just doing that.
Wow. What were you recording on back in those days? Was this the
ADATs,
late, like
Elise's ADAT? Yeah.
What year-ish would that have been?
95, 94. So Elise's ADAT, those first digital that you put a super VHS tape and you could link three together and have 24 tracks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember those well. My first experience with those was like all the way in like 2000 even, and I was like, wow,
they're pretty useful, man.
I
used them on
4-track tape recorder before that.
I think I even helped. I can't remember what it was. I've definitely used them with Trace Bruins a couple times, where we were like throwing some Secret Chiefs tracks that he had on 24-inch tape and had a SMPTE track on one of them, so it would dump back in on time, and it was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not doing that these days, I assume.
No, just using the computer like everybody else. I try to get a pretty gritty sound somehow in the box or before it gets in the box, so I do what I can.
Do you have got any favorite pre's and stuff that you use?
I'm pretty slimmed down at this point. I've moved so many times. I just bought like a Neve 1073 clone, like the warm audio, and I have an 1176 clone, and they sound pretty good. And there's so many good plugins these days that are emulating some of the old gear that I like. That I really, if you listen to some of my tracks soloed, like clean versus after I put on the plugins, it gets pretty dirty. I don't like there's certain things I like clean, and then there's other things I don't. So it's like the drums might sound pretty clean and the bass, but then the guitar tone is going to sound like some kind of Joe Meek thing that was, being overdriven with all kinds of stuff. But
right. Yeah, and just endless experimentation with plugins now. I mean, it's just
and it's pretty cool. I'm sure it's not as good as the real stuff, but it allows you to I want to run it through this Russian tape echo and then go into like a vinyl record and less noise but more grit on the preamp of the vinyl. All kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of Spruance, man, like I know obviously Bungle and Secret Chiefs, but that. One of I think he played guitar on Faith No More's King for a Day record, and sonically, I mean, all the songs are great, the instrument, everything's great, but sonically, I love that album. I just think it sounds
very
so
clean. It's a record you could probably test a sound system to. There's not that many you could say that about. That record I would probably do. I always reach for, I'm like your standard sound guy, like Steely Dan, Deacon Blues. That's what we're testing the sound system to, because it's a perfect mix, like absolutely perfect sonics. But yeah, that record would come to mind as like a rock record that sort of hits all those boxes.
Cool. So the engineering aspect and production thing is that you've been doing that from the get-go then with.
Yeah, I kind of just jumped into her back when we had those ADATs. It wasn't like I didn't even know what a producer was or whatever, but that Don, I'll send you some downloads to that Don Salsa record, but you'll be blown away that, 11th graders were recording this. The first song is 30 minutes long, changing every we would record it in like little 30-second segments, because each segment was like its own thing completely.
Right.
And we probably spent 3 years recording that record.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know much about engineering. I wouldn't do this now, but I would record 22 tracks, and then I would commit to a mix on those onto 2 more tracks. Then we'd record 22 more, do it again. And then,
well, you had to back then, right? I mean,
I
you
know,
didn't really
but
have like,
running it back through the lame Tascam preamps like 3 times. I don't know. These days, I know better than to do something like that, but that's just what we had to do.
Did you ever have any noticeable degradation in the or sort of like because I've heard a lot too, especially in the tape days, guys. I've heard that Ride the Lightning was like this, or some various where they would record the tape. They would record it and then speed up the tape a little bit so it sounded faster, and it actually like Ride the Lightning is actually out of tune. That record is totally out of tune.
So it's up.
Yeah,
because his voice does sound a little high now that you mention it.
Yeah, and try to play
it
around. It
wasn't just the coke and alcohol.
Yeah. Well, it kind of makes sense. I mean, I think they really had their shit together on Master of Puppets. Not to say that they weren't awesome before that, but I mean, they were still young and getting.
Listening to the drum beats on Ride the Lightning, it sounds kind of sly. Yeah, they sounded much tighter and heavier on Master of Puppets.
Yeah, I think Masters where they really just nailed it. And then and then they make And Justice was like the most technically pristine
Justice
thing
would have
ever.
been good if they just would have everyone's heard of it. Turn up the damn bass. It's just so TNT. Yeah.
Poor Jason Newsted. At least he got to shine
songs,
on the
I know a lot of old school
Jesus.
purists that don't like that record. Like to me, the Black Album is where it started. Now, and even in retrospect, that album is good compared to everything that came after it.
Yeah.
But to me, the songs on Justice, like the title track and Black, and they're just these long, drawn out, kind of like Master of Puppets. But the compositionally, they're unbelievable. Just sonically, it's just kind of empty.
Yeah, it is. It's so hollow. It's such a weird album for
that.
I think there's a couple of videos or maybe YouTube videos where they put the bass back in. Yeah.
And Justice for Jason. Yeah. It sounds amazing. You're like, there's a bass line there. It's so cool.
Yeah. Oh, it's great.
Yeah, that one would hope that would be an official thing. But there is a thing that to be said that it is a unique album. It's very sonically unique, but I think it would be cool to have an alternate version officially
They
released.
just remastered it, too, and decided they still weren't going to pull the bass up.
Stupid.
And there's interviews with the producer that said, no, we want there to be no bass. Like, that's what they said.
No,
it was like hazing. It was like,
yeah.
Wow.
That's what, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I forget how that. Oh, yeah, but the old tape days, right? And if you've a lot of the stuff like the Rolling Stones are never in tune. So I don't know if that's a tape thing, or I also heard they tuned to Mick Jagger's voice. So who fucking knows? But I know a lot of times in the tape days, things get a little wonky.
We do non-standard tunings in like High Castle, like by choice. I do a lot of it would be a whole wormhole to get into. Feel free to ask me about it later, but I study sort of like harmonic series and Pythagorean tunings and how to tune things to like nature. Like, how would you, if I were to take an entire day of Earth, how do I make one frequency that vibrates one time in a day? And then you can always multiply by 2, and you're just getting octaves of that frequency. So I tune according to things like that. Like, let's tune to the day, or let's tune to the year. Wow.
So not a 440 thing at all.
Yeah, no, we have a special tuning, A equals 435.43 hertz, which coincidentally goes back to the old French standard agreed upon in the Treaty of Versailles, as luck would have it. I found this as my sort of harmonic series calculations, but it turns out this was the old agreed upon standard. And apparently the Nazi Germans turned it to 440 is what I've heard. Yeah.
It's more tense. It was supposed to cause a tenseness.
Yeah. No,
I don't know. I mean, we're all a bunch of crazy fuckers and 1,000 shootings a day. It must be working. I mean, humans have always been nuts. So it's like not like.
But now we have technology. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we just know about it more,
Yeah.
But yeah, that is an interesting thing to think that it's on a subconscious level that we're not even aware of.
It's huge, dude.
I would imagine
vibrations
it's true,
are everything. Yeah,
frequencies, everything.
Yeah.
We always get into this kind of stuff. But well, that's pretty interesting, man. That you guys now, is this going all the way back to Estradasphere, or is this a new thing?
This is something I've been studying for years, and I think I only really implemented the tuning systems with High Castle, because if I had my choice, we would be tuning like not even to equal temperament. But when you're playing with a guitar, you have to compromise. But I can tune my synthesizers to make my major thirds in tune with the harmonic series, which are major third in equal temperament is 14 cents sharp. So if you tuned it to the harmonic series or even to harmonics on the guitar, you couldn't do you could only tune to one key. It's kind of like, modal music or Indian music so we make a compromise and say that every half step is 100 cents off and they're equally spaced, but that's not how the harmonic series works at all. Certain intervals are very good on the harmonic series, like fifths and fourths, but major thirds and dominant sevenths are way off, and you wouldn't believe how they really sound.
That's interesting, because those two intervals in particular, but that kind of in a way, those two intervals create a tritone, right? So I mean there's
Which
an interesting dissonance already happening.
Yeah,
the third and the 7, right?
Yeah, which make up the meat of like a dominant chord, right?
Right.
Yeah.
One thing, I mean, here's something, dude, and shamefully, I've been teaching music forever, and I don't really have a great answer to this question. The perfect intervals, right? I mean, is that why they're called perfect? Because in a harmonic series,
dude, Western,
in a mathematical sense,
like notation is so ass backwards. So here's my big bone with it: is it's not based on math. It's based on, they take the major scale, right, and they number it based on the major scale. So every time I say go do a perfect fifth, do you know which harmonic of the harmonic series creates the interval of the perfect fifth?
No.
It's the third harmonic creates the perfect fifth. Do you know which interval creates the major third? The fifth. So we've actually inverted math by just arbitrarily assigning numbers. And musicians, you're taught just memorize this, but you're not actually getting any science. Like there's no musical science. You're getting music as a practical art. By having divorced ourselves from the concept of the math that creates harmonies, because every harmony is just a ratio, right?
Yeah,
more or less. But the harmonic series, I mean, we can go over this some other time, man. I'm gonna.
No, I want to know if you have it memorized. I remember learning about this, and I never remember. It's like, isn't it the octave first, right?
Dude, let me show you this chart I have on my wall that I created. Let me. I can't even see my own camera, but you see this thing?
Yeah.
So those are all the numbers of an octave, and I can send you this, but it tells you like how far it is off from equal temperament and how it occurs in nature, basically, or as natural tuning. And natural tuning is entirely based on the harmonic series. Like when you hit one note on an open string, you know this, right? That there's not one note that comes out. There's an infinite number of notes in the ratio of 1-to-1, 2-1, 3-1, 4-1, 5-1 in diminishing volume. And the reason you think you only hear one note is because 1-1 and 2-1 are octaves.
Right.
And it's by far the loudest. And the next one's a perfect fifth. And that just blends into that one.
So that's what you meant by the third. The third in the series. The third note in the series is the perfect fifth.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because, I mean, it makes sense to me in terms of like, that's the most harmonious frequency, right?
You can't have a consonance without a perfect fifth, right?
Right.
You would have a sharp 5 or a flat 5, and it would turn into some cool dominant, like sharp 5 or sharp 11 or something like that, right?
Okay, so after the fifth comes something before. Is it another tonic and then a third?
So any double, anytime you can have something, it's the same thing. So 1 and 2 are octaves, and then 2 and 4 are octaves. So let's say we're in C. It's 1 is C, 2 is C, 4 is C, 8 is C, 16 is C until eternity.
All the doubles. Okay.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense. You wouldn't believe how much sense it all makes mathematically. And you know, my big problem with it is the perfect fifth actually embodies the meaning, the philosophical meaning that's been known through all, you know, civilizations, through all of history of the number 3. Like the number 3 has so much significance if you study metaphysics and philosophy, and all the numbers do. But so every time we sit there and say perfect fifth, in our minds, we're completely doing ourselves a disservice by thinking of the number 5 when it's actually the number 3.
Yeah. 3 is in the series of the harmony.
Yes. It's the principle of 3 that's coming out when you play a perfect fifth. So, yeah, it's a subject.
Man, my mind just got blown.
I know, dude. I'm going to do actually like start a web series on this and build it through like the most basic steps at a time.
I'm go back to all my students I've taught and be like, look, everything you've learned is wrong. I'm sorry.
You can learn both at once. You can learn, look, this is just a practical like training wheels kind of thing.
Yeah, practical language, right? Where you go, here's 12 tones, and we just assume that. I mean, and that's the thing. Like when you said something about a third, whatever, being 14 cents sharp. I mean, from a well, fuck, I guess that's, it means you're going to be even sharper on the guitar, right? It's already naturally sharp. And then when you fret a note, because when you fret a note, it's usually going to it goes sharp. Like it's impossible to sort of have a fretted note not be a little sharp, right?
And think about Western music. What do? Everything in Western music is based on moving, chord change, keep on moving. We're not in tune. Whereas like an Indian raga or some kind of modal Persian music, they can just sit on those notes because they're in tune. They're like this sounds great. We're like, keep moving. I need a better chord change. Let's keep it moving.
Yeah, but most of us don't have those like freak ears. Like maybe you've got those, right? Where
you can develop them.
Are you got the guy that's like, oh, that's 10 cents off? You know?
They did a study once that said, like, what can average Joe hear? An average Joe can hear a new note at 12 cents. So if anything beyond 12 cents, you're at a significant amount. So to have a major third that far off, and that's supposed to be our pretty chord, can you imagine how pretty it really sounds?
Yeah.
And here's the thing, as a singer, if I played a C major on a piano and asked you to sing an E, do you know what you're going to naturally tune to?
No.
The bass. You're going to, without even thinking about it.
You're always going to hear that. Yeah.
And so you're disregarding that 14 cents sharp major third right in the middle of that piano because there is such a strong connection of 5 against 1 from the major third to the bass, the note of C.
Would it be natural then, because of the way we're sort of trained to hear this system, to want to sing sharp? Would that be a natural thing?
It depends on what note and what interval. Like, so the major third, like I said, is sharp in our system, so we should probably sing that flat. And we do if we're a halfway decent singer. And what do we use? No one will admit why we use so much vibrato, but let's face it. It's because we're out of tune.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, it's a stylistic thing, but I mean, opera, it was like to amplify itself before there was any kind of amplification. And then it became part of the style. You analyze it on the oscilloscope and you're like, dude, that's a semitone in each direction. Little wide for my taste. You know, I like the kind of vibrato that kind of comes in at the end of the phrase where it's like, this is the day of the, you know, just kind of,
right.
I don't like where it's just ubiquitous and kind of, but yeah,
back to, I mean, it obviously sounds like you're very knowledgeable in this, in the field of musicology, music history, as well as, you know, obviously music and, you know, playing music. But like so back once upon a time in the classical days, Bach, Baroque stuff to Mozart or whatever, what was like their whole, I mean, they had developed this westernized system with the 12-tone system,
right?
But their tuning was nowhere near 440. Was it what you were talking about earlier? Was something
there was
different?
You could look up all the historical tunings. I think it was as low as like 415 at one point. And they would use, I think, tuning forks and things like that. Then eventually they tried to standardize it. So I'm not. There's a great book called "How Equal Temperament Ruined Harmony." Not ruined music, but ruined harmony. And they'll go through all those sort of historical tunings, and I'm not any expert by any means on that. I just knew that the stuff I came to through my weird, like, color spectrum research and like natural cycles like days and years and things like that. I based my tuning system on that, and it just so happened to accord that, like I said, like, wow, this happened to be what they agreed upon in the Treaty of Versailles. And I don't think they were thinking about, you know, the length of the day, but you know how things just work out naturally when you don't think about it. It's like there's a sort of innate, you know, instinctual element to some of these things where they just sort of arrive at the right place. And when you hear this tuning system, I'll send you some of the High Castle stuff, but it sounds good and it sounds different. Wow. Like it sounds kind of out of tune, like not out of tune with itself, but like, you know how when you hear one of those, like you said, like the Rolling Stones songs or some of these songs that are not in 440, it kind of throws you for a little bit of a loop if you're listening close. Yeah.
Well, or you might not even pick up on it until
most
you try to play an instrument
yeah.
along to it. And you're like, oh God, you know.
Right.
And there's, you know, several albums that are like that, which a lot of bands, and I know I've just certainly heard about it more in recent years where people are, what is it, not 440, but 432 or some shit.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
I've settled at like 435 and a half is the one I do, but,
and what's the Versailles tuning?
There was a A435 and the one I had arrived at on my own was 435.43 hertz.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so we had it. They had it correct for 20 years, and then Nazi Germany.
The Nazis,
ruined it all.
they messed it up. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And that makes sense. Checks out.
And yeah, we've been, you know, like I said, you're right. Like you said earlier, our music now is tense. It might be awesome. It might be like rocking. It might be cool, but it's not really peaceful. Like I think we could all agree on that. Most of the music we even all probably love is like it's not sitting there making me want to like meditate. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Where were we?
Maybe like,
you started playing and were, when did you start playing? You must have started playing pretty young, right?
So 9 was when I saw La Bamba. Played guitar until
right.
4 or 5 years until Nirvana came along. Switched to bass. We started that group Don Salsa, which had gone through progressions from like glam rock to a grungy type of band, and then eventually, Mr. Bungle kind of came, and through influence of various things that kids may do in high school, our world was kind of immediately shifted to a completely different place and never really restored. So that kind of really influenced us. So Don Salsa, was really sort of Disco Volante sort of homage to, and it's not lame. I mean, you hear I used to hear Trey tell me how many lame tapes he would get of bands that are trying to sound like Bungle. And there was always this like Patton wannabe singer. He's like, dude, this was the only time I'd heard us like not be a lame influence. Cause we didn't try to do Patton. We were just doing these like crazy tritone metal riffs and all this stuff. But, it came across as respectful and kind of cute because we were in high school.
Well, that makes it super impressive. And I mean, I guess Bungle was, that was, before I had really gotten into, or even, I didn't even hear Bungle until probably like 2000 or something. I'd heard of them, but I mean, obviously, but for me, just like for so many people, at first it was like this jolt of just like, wow, this is because I was a big Faith No More fan, and then I was like, this was so next level, another planet I wasn't ready for.
We didn't even like Disco Volante when it came out at first. We were so thrown for a loop because we were expecting more like circus clown to the next level, and it was just like, nope, you are going to learn about Morricone and all these like film soundtracks, and you're going to learn about patience because we're going to start the record with a totally controversial or like confrontational song that's not going to make you feel good. And so it took us a couple weeks, and we're like, okay, I'm starting to get this, and it kind of became our thing. So we ended up, I decided not to go to college. I was like, I'm just going to do music. And my parents were, they're pretty well off, and they weren't the type. My dad was a doctor, and like, he wasn't like, you're going to be a doctor too. Like, he probably honestly should have been a little more like that. I probably wouldn't have been 40 years old when I got my first decent paying job. If he had been a little bit more, but they were just like, whatever. And so Jason, his parents were not like that. So they're like, you're going to school. So he went to UC Santa Cruz, and I just followed him up there and just lived. And then we met, some other people that were going to school there, and that ended up becoming Estradasphere.
Okay.
So we met, at the music center. Some of them were majoring in music. John Hooley, the saxophone player, Timba Harris, the violinist, was studying there. So was the drummer. He wasn't studying music, but he played in the jazz ensembles. And we met Dave Murray, and he played jazz because he was in the jazz ensembles. And then we're like, let's jam. And it turned out, he likes death metal is his main type of music. Yeah. And none of us were really death metalers. Jason could play some of those riffs, but Dave was the influence in Estradasphere that's like, let's turn this metal.
Disco Volante is the pinnacle of like, from what I've heard of that, like, I mean, what is that? Carrie Stress in the Jaw with the sax and the guitars just doing all these crazy lines. And the Merry Go Bye Bye. I just love those tunes. Same with me. I mean, and sonically that record is, it's almost, it's kind of got the Injustice thing. It's almost tragic how bad it is.
Yeah, some of it, I like most of that sound. Like Chemical Marriage to me sounds,
it is cool. That's a good one.
The dynamics are so wide. There should have been a little more limiting on that, because like you turn it way up at the beginning, and then by the end your speakers are destroyed. Like, But the cool thing with us with metal, like since none of us except our drummer were like primary metal people, we just weren't. Like I'd gone up in glam metal, and Jason had gotten into some heavier stuff. Like, most bands are literally metal or they aren't, and that's it. Like, so with the Estradasphere, it's like, no, we could turn this Greek song metal by the end. And I don't know why there isn't more stuff like that, but that was like our thing, is like, we're the band that's going to turn some like world music thing metal, and there's just isn't a lot of examples of that. There's a couple bands that kind of do that, but Dave added some authenticity, because he was into all the like Meshuggah type of polyrhythms, and he knew every little subgenre of metal, and I'm like, I don't know what the difference between grindcore and thrash is. I just don't. That's just not
the rest
my
of
thing.
Us are like Metallica, Slayer, Pantera.
Yeah, then there's black metal, and there's just so many subgenres.
There's all this shit.
I'm like,
No, that's great, man. I love that. And I feel like I got like, especially when I kind of started discovering those really open type bands, And then it's for the musical ADD person, it's great, you know, because I
Right.
love those little bursts of like death metal in small doses. I don't necessarily want to go listen to a whole album of it, you know. But
Right.
when you have that moment of bebop and that moment of death metal, and then a moment of something, you know, doo wop or whatever, it's
Yeah.
like super cool, you know.
That I can do. I'm a big doo-wopper.
Well, I saw, kind of that Beach Boys influence on some stuff.
That was like almost a separate thing for me for so long because I had kind of worked it into Estradasphere a little bit, but I always knew I couldn't do too much of it in there. So I have like whole albums of my sort of 50s and 60s type of music. But we ended up.
Go ahead.
I'll finish sort of what happened, like how did Estradasphere. So we formed. We were still like way into bungle, so we used to go up and, you know, see them in San Francisco. They were still touring like Disco Volante in those days, I think. I saw them on that tour. But I was sort of semi-stalking them, where I took a Don Salsa tape and we went to a Cobra show, I think at Slim's in San Francisco. And I would wait in the parking lot, and I think I got it to Patton. I think I just handed it to him before he walked in. He ended up opening the show that night of him and Zorn's Improv by playing the tape.
Oh, wow.
And then I don't remember exactly what happened, but like I got that tape to Trey and I told him about the K2500 Kurzweil keyboard. I still have it right here. It's the same one I programmed.
Oh, hell yeah.
I programmed the California tour on that record for them for their live sounds. But so I think my hook line to Trey when I saw him, like it might have been after the show, was like, dude, I've got this keyboard. And dude, you can use it. I will bring it up to your house. And he's like, cool, man, let's do it. And he gave me his number. I ended up driving up to San Francisco, dumping off my keyboard. And this is funny because Trey's like most people that know him know he's a very hard guy to get a hold of. You might give him your thing and be like, dude, can I come get it? You're like, you're not going to hear anything. But like, so he was actually recording. This has got like a 16-track sequencer on it. And he just jumped right in and figured out how to use it. And I showed him a little bit, but he wrote like none of them knew they were robots on this keyboard.
Wow.
Gollum from California, and they ended up using it and recording some of the string sounds are from this keyboard that they used on that record. So then I ended up, so I was kind of in with Trey, and we just happened to be starting to record Estradasphere at that time, and he was just starting his mimicry label. So he's like, hey, why don't you guys be on my label? And that was kind of the way that our bands came together.
Cool.
We did a tour together in 2000 or 2001. It was Estradasphere and Secret Chiefs. And I was playing bass in both groups. That was a pretty cool little deal. And I think for their California tour, Trey came down to Santa Cruz, spent like probably a week and a half, and we programmed we programmed 2 of the keyboards for California, which was the majority of the keyboard. So they were very odd key mappings. Like it'd be like, this 5 notes are timpani, these 10 notes are glockenspiel, then this is a B3 organ that if you hit this button, it turns into string sound, like those kind of weird key mappings. Then there was like samples on top of it. Like if you listen live, I mean, to those shows, you hear they're using samples. It's like violins and accordions for Ars Moriendi.
Well, yeah, they have to. There's so many sounds. Yeah. But that was tracked that way, or that's live?
No, that was, so they took, like Trey would record stuff onto DAT tape off of the 2-inch. And then we would sample it in segments. So you'd press for like, you know, for one bar, and then you would just you'd keep moving up, you know, every bar so that it would account for tempo lapses.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So there was no sync track. There was no sync click going on. It was just that Danny, the drummer, was hearing these samples and could readjust if they had to. And I'm surprised there weren't more disasters on that tour for that, because you know how bad that could go if someone doesn't hear something or whatever. But it turned out awesome, man. I still have those samples. I could load stuff in, and I was tempted to make a video, but I just don't know some of those guys well enough. I don't know Mike really. I'm like, I don't know if they'd be pissed me like pulling back the curtain on how they did that. You know, those key maps on that.
That'd be a pretty cool fucking YouTube
it would.
Video,
I don't want to piss anyone off, and
I hear you. Get permission at, you know, if you get the go ahead from everybody.
I'm sure it would be a no.
No, dude, fuck you.
No one wants to see no one wants people to see behind the curtain.
Damn, dude, that's pretty cool. So then you guys, when did you guys start? Your first record was what? 90,
Estradasphere?
2000?
99 or 98?
99?
90, yeah.
So right
99.
off the heels of California, basically.
Yeah, it was right in that same era.
Your first record came out.
It's understood on Mimicry, yeah.
Okay. Does he still have that label? Is that what
he does? It's not like, he doesn't he's not actively trying to put out a bunch of bands. Friends will come to him and he'll say, let's put out the record. But it's a cool little label, but it's not like the kind of label that has a promo department and all that stuff.
Not like Ipecac. That's kind of,
Ipecac definitely has more resources, than Mimicry does. From what I can tell.
So when did you guys start touring?
Right. The first official tour we did was that it was either, I think, in 2000 with Secret
Disco
Chiefs, where we did US and Canada.
Yeah.
I think it was post California. And then we were, Secret Chiefs had Book M out at the time, and we had It's Understood. So we did US and Canada. That was about it. About 30-day tour. Just kind of hit all the spots you'd expect. Austin and Montreal and New York.
And you guys just DIY booked it all, or?
No, he'd have a booking agent.
You had a booking agent?
Yeah. Whoever Trey was using at the time.
What kind of venues were you playing? Like the Slims type stuff?
Yeah,
cool
like
venues?
places like, they're pretty small. I mean, Secret Chiefs is much smaller than Bungle. I mean, Secret Chiefs is like a weird filter of Mr. Bungle fans. Everything of Mr. Bungle fans is the contingent from like the patent fanboy meatheads, mostly like Faith No More, but can kind of tolerate Bungle, to the like, no, I like Bungle a little better, all the way to the people that like, no, I study Pythagoras and, all the metaphysical stuff that the Secret Chiefs 3 point at. There's people, in the fan base that understand all of the symbology that he's throwing out there, which is like really intricate and deep stuff.
Wow. Okay.
Ciphers, like I think most of the records have some like multi-level ciphers. One of who actually our guitarist in High Castle, Chris Bogan, I think was one of the only people to crack the cipher for Book M, where you get you end up getting to an email address, but it's way beyond me. Like I love symbols and philosophy, but like I'm not good with the technical like coding different languages and stuff.
I mean, doesn't Tool do some of that kind of stuff?
Maybe.
There's like a lot of
I'm
coding.
not super familiar with Tool, but
I just think that they have some of all this kind of odd meter bullshit. It ends up making some universal message or some shit,
I would bet that the Secret Chief stuff, like Trey is like, has an encyclopedic knowledge of like the history of metaphysics and sort of as they relate to all of these sort of ancient ideas, stuff that we barely or don't really understand at all anymore, but you kind of tie the threads together by reading enough, Henry Corbin and Manly P. Hall and all these people that were, from the early, 1900s that had this crazy knowledge that had gone back through, they call it the golden thread, but it goes back all the way through and carried that knowledge through these really dark times where they had to sort of encode it in these ways so that people wouldn't even know that you were studying that stuff. Because the Dark Ages, weren't very friendly to some of those things.
Nobody wants, when you control everybody, the last thing you want them to do is become wise.
No, exactly.
Get knowledge of any sort. Oh man, what you got, Vic? How's your study of words that Tim said that I don't even can't even repeat? They're already all gone out of my memory.
I'm trying to figure out which one's the brown note.
The brown note?
From the harmonics.
There is no brown note. It's an interesting question, actually. So, do you guys know that sound and light are the same thing? But light happens like thousands of octaves above sound, and that's the only difference is you change the octave, and it eventually changes which instrument perceives it. So there are discernible notes you can figure out just by studying, like light, they measure in terahertz. So all you need to do to get it to hertz is convert it, which is just a simple calculation, and then you reduce the octave like a couple thousand times to get it into our frequency range. But brown is a mixture of colors, right? So it's not one color. Light starts at red, and it goes around, right? Red, yellow, or orange, orange, yellow, green, blue. It starts at G, actually, believe it or not. Somewhere vaguely G is red.
Wait a minute. Yeah, dude, that's so... Look, all the things I can't hear 12 cents different. I'm no musical genius. I don't understand any of this shit.
Eric
I understand the basic fun. But what is a weird thing... Yeah, Eric Johnson for sure would be like, oh, that's the red Duracell. But yeah, what's so interesting is that I've kind of thought about it in color, and I don't have perfect pitch or anything, but I've kind of thought about it in colors before, and G has a red this is not going to coincide with anything you're saying, but for some reason, I've always wondered about that. And now that you're talking about the light spectrum, because I always talk about a sort of a spectrum of sound. I think it's an easy analogy when you talk about modes and stuff, right? You kind of talk about light to dark, right? Like a sonic rainbow.
It's all wavelengths, though, right? Different wavelengths.
Yeah, it is wavelengths.
Everything's wavelengths.
It starts at red.
Okay, so can you actually tell us kind of?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Easily.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So red is G. G sharp is a reddish orange. A is a orange. B flat B is like orangish yellow to yellow is B. Green is C, and it's actually, believe it or not, green is like the center of everything, and it makes a lot of sense to me, like lushness. Where it starts, believe it or not, and this, I'm not going to get into this because I'll confuse everyone, but the light spectrum doesn't start at the fundamental of the root. It actually starts at the third. So the top of the circle is 1. And that's green. Then moving on, we have turquoise, blue, bluish purple, crimson, and then you have like sort of a sunset kind of vibe. It's actually the color of sunset as it's fading out, interestingly enough. And I'll kind of show you so light creates a dominant 7th interval. It doesn't finish the octaves and it goes to black. Guess which area, you ever see the man in the circle where it's standing there? And so the right leg would be red, and you're going red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. The one spot is the tritone interval, which is below the legs. It's where the sun don't shine, is the one note that it doesn't complete of the octave. And it just so happens to be the tritone of the fundamental, which would be 1. So green. But anyway, where I was going with that was even some of the, most people don't like to talk religion or whatever, but the people that wrote the old stuff, like the Old Testament, let's just say they were speaking a language that we do not even understand in the slightest to this day. These were the people of the ancient Egyptian mystery schools. Mm-hmm. So when they tried to recreate what does it actually say in this hundreds of years after the Hebrew tongue was lost when they were slaves in Babylon? Let's just say they did not understand what they were putting inside of those words as like symbols. But the interesting thing I found is there's a linguist from France named Fabre d'Olivet, who's the only guy to study every language surrounding Hebrew. This guy was in like the 1800s. He worked for Napoleon, and Napoleon ended up not liking him because he was doing all these studies of ancient stuff. And Napoleon tried to execute him, and he had to go into hiding. But he had the most knowledge I've ever seen of linguistics and sort of metaphysical linguistics. So he reconstructed the Hebrew tongue the best that he could, because he thought it was completely lost as far as the symbolic value of what they were actually saying. So he maintains that the Egyptians hid the secrets of their sciences inside of Genesis. Guess what the 3rd verse of Genesis 1 says? And remember, I just told you that the 3rd harmonic is the beginning of light. It says, "Let there be light." That stuff. So when you start to study it from a scientific perspective instead of a religious perspective, you actually start to, I could go, and obviously I'm not going to do it here, but you can go up every single one of those things and tie it to the harmonic that's being, 1 against 2, 1 against 3. And you're studying, here's what I know about that interval. And you're like, holy crap. It makes, look what it calls an octave, Genesis 1-2. Because an octave is the 2. It calls it a formless void, but the spirit is inside of there, right? And that's the harmonic series. When I play one note, though every note is playing inside of it, you don't perceive it. But I couldn't think of a better description of an octave than a formless void, where you've created the entirety of the universe, right? Any note you hit is going to be somewhere inside of that octave, but you don't have any harmony yet. You just have this palette where things could go, and they're being hinted at subtly by the, infinite harmonics that are ringing out of those notes. So there's whole other ways to study some of that ancient stuff that doesn't have any of the dogma or any of that kind of stuff that is pretty freaking interesting that I spend a lot of time on personally.
Yeah, that's awesome, actually.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've talked about this some before on this podcast, but I mean, not at this level where you're really diving into true mathematics. I mean, not what I always say, the mathematics of music, but that's really just a like you're saying, it's not a scientifically mathematical language.
Especially as far as the harmonies go. Rhythms,
right,
yes. Rhythms are cut and dry.
It's a math language that we can communicate
music is
easily.
2 planes of math, right? Rhythm and then the harmonies.
Right.
The intersecting.
So rhythm is perfect.
Yes.
Harmonies are not.
7/8 is 7/8. Who can dispute that, right? Yeah. And it's a shame because you could actually tune, let's say you wanted to write a song in 7/8. You could write a song where you actually choose a frequency that vibrates 7 times inside of a second or inside of a minute or whatever it is. And you could actually have those 2 planes lining up in a way that most people would never even think of doing.
But would most people hear it?
No.
But that's where we get to a thing. I wonder if, just like I always talk about live, performances, or, one could argue, the music, yeah, you're playing the same notes, the same tones, but there's something deeper, right? The deeper spiritual side of it all. Here we go, tying everything spiritually and mathematically inside. It's all related, right?
I'd imagine they feel like a vibe to it, right? Like not necessarily
or just completely subliminal or subconscious or whatever. Yeah, you don't have to.
There's an effect that it may have. And so, like, even though a listener may not consciously understand that at all, it could still be relevant, right?
Right. And we can't, if we're studying this kind of stuff, we can't be sitting there like wondering, is Joe Blow going to understand? I don't know. Like, I think, yes, I think there is an effect. And I think there's certain universals that somehow make its way into it. Look at some of the, look at the history of rock and like what songs stand out as like, not just a song like that's a cool harmonies and chords, but as far as like song arrangement, that it's like a long form. I'm talking like Stairway to Heaven type of things, or Bohemian Rhapsody, or Billy Joel Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, or these like 7-minute songs. There's something in those songs, and I don't even know how much the artists were thinking of them originally, but they just have this sort of universal appeal that people just seem to get, that there's something more to the song. What better way? People, it's so easy to hate Stairway to Heaven because it's been played so much, but you're like, what better way could you use to describe spring, the burgeoning springtime, than if there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed now. It's just a spring clean for the May Queen. That's incredible.
Brilliant lyrics. Yeah. Brilliant lyrics.
And I think there's something to all that stuff.
Yeah. One thing in particular about that song that I think is really cool is the discipline of how long it waits
for the drum beat to come in.
It just goes and goes, and then when it finally happens,
and is there an electric piano in there that John Paul Jones?
There might be.
I think it's like there's flutes, guitar, and I think it's electric piano is the main, like a Rhodes type of thing.
Yeah.
And then finally Bonham comes in, and it's like,
and
the 12 string or whatever he's using. Yes. So it's easy to look past all those songs. I'm a big believer that most of those kind of songs really are that good, and maybe we've just heard them too much or whatever. But Bohemian Rhapsody, are you kidding me? Like, Queen could never write a song as good as Bohemian Rhapsody again. Like, name me one other Queen song that's even comparable as far as expansive song form.
Yeah.
There just isn't. They have lots of other great songs, but man, that song is like, it's just ridiculous to have a little mini opera in the middle of it. And
oh my God.
And no one knows what the lyrics are about. A lot of people say, is it about him coming out? I love lyrics where you really have to dive in, and the best you can ever do is come up with some interpretation, but there's never anything concrete. He would never say what it was about. A lot of people think it's the sort of, he had the girlfriend, but he was bisexual and couldn't come out to the world at that time. So it's a pretty good explanation, but you still look, Mama just killed a man. It's not direct. He's not like, then I can't tell the world what, I hate lyrics that are direct, that are like, it's just so, I like it when it's more like, hey, I'm going to write a song about having a hard time coming out of the closet, and it's going to start like this. Mama just killed a man.
Right. Like, well, you're just sucked in immediately too.
Yes.
Just immediately sucked into that from a lyrical standpoint. So I think it's safe to say you're probably a real big sort of like commercial bro country type fan.
Are you talking like, no, not much. Like,
that was a joke. We always make fun of that. Yeah, no.
I can handle like, I know, like, I like the charm of older country stuff.
Oh,
like,
of course.
And I'm not like encyclopedic, so I can't sit here and name a bunch of obscure people that I'm supposed to like.
Right.
But, I would rather listen to like Hank Williams on the Porch than Toby Keith. It's not even the same genre. Like, the only thing I can distinguish of why is this country is the twang in their voice, because otherwise it's just bad rock.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think what's ironic about what big business country has become in a lot of ways. Not to say there's not still really cool, authentic stuff, and thank God for like guys like Chris Stapleton and stuff. But like, you know, I don't even know these guys' catalogs, and I don't really care to. But these kind of names that we could throw out, their Florida Georgia lines or whatever, assuming they're, you know, most of their songs are pretty hokey. You know, they're very written for a specific purpose, the good time party, frat boy stuff or whatever. Right. Whatever. Yeah. But like, yeah, I mean, that's just like, it's very formulaic, and there's nothing like musically, like the thing about the old country, it's all authentic, right? You're telling a story. It's you and your guitar telling us. It's very personal and authentic and awesome. And
the new stuff is just fraud. It's just total fraud as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I don't.
Spring break country.
Spring break country is what we do. That's where we came up with that term came out on a podcast, which is,
I mean, but listening, it
sums it up perfectly.
Even the old stuff, I don't even know if I have too much of it in my library, but I'm open to it. Like I don't mind listening to some old bluegrass, and I love the vibe of it. I love the fact that it sort of encapsulates this period of America where things were more innocent and sort of or just as far as like, you know, we got my family and the home on the range, and we're eating and things are good, you know, like just simple kind of family stuff, you know, or the hardships.
Yeah, you're just talking about your life, and people, and that was why it became a popular thing, because people could relate to it. But like anything that becomes popular, it gets destroyed. Like if for some reason, you know, progressive rock ever became this super popular thing, like then somehow progressive rock bands would become terrible. You know what I mean? Because it would get commercialized and they would formulaically ruin it. What I was saying about what you said, because I agree 100%, like a lot of that sort of like just goofball, you know, bro country stuff. It is basically it's Poison, but with a cowboy hat and a twingy voice. It's just
girl,
just really
always recognize
instead of wearing spandex, they're wearing Wranglers. Yeah,
there's a lot of men dead.
Poison with a twang.
Poison with a twang.
Yeah, because Every Rose Has Its Thorn would be a great country song, right? I mean, it pretty much is. He doesn't have a twang, but
does that shit. Well, a lot of those guys started doing it. I mean, a lot of those guys have gone the country route, you know?
Yeah. Because, I mean, I'm always impressed, and this is a little bit of a non sequitur, but like these bands like Poison, I actually knew Poison. Like my dad was he was an emergency room doctor in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills that worked graveyard shift at Cedars-Sinai for the main part of his career.
He's basically saved half the rock stars.
Dude, I've got Use Your Illusion 2 gold record on my wall right here. I don't know if you can see that. He was on that record. There's a doctor on this. He was on Use Your Illusion 1. There's a doctor on Coma shocking people. That's my dad.
No shit.
So anyway, my childhood was filled with like, hey, you want to go see Axl in the studio? You want to go spend the night at CC DeVille's house?
You were like Dweezil Zappa.
Dude, my dad, like, I would never, like my kids, like I got a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. I would never drop them off at CC DeVille's house and then come back in the morning.
Oh, no.
Like,
how much cocaine did you do at age 12?
That's what I'm saying, is I'm sure he must have said, like, hey, don't do the coke near him, because I remember he was really animated, but I didn't connect the dots. And he was really cool, like, really great guy. Actually a great guitarist, believe it or not. You know, Poison's got a pretty bad rap, but that guy can play. Like, he really can play.
I don't know. One thing I'll say about Poison, though, like, I got into him, and I don't shit all over.
I loved him at the time, man.
I don't like everything they've done, but I thought Flesh and Blood was a pretty cool record for what it is.
The only real record that means anything to me from that entire era is Appetite for Destruction. That's a great a record from
Guns
top
N' Roses
to bottom. Whereas Poison was like the 3 singles and then absolute garbage. A filler was the rest of the. And a lot. Motley Crue was the same way. Warrant, they were all the same way. But Guns N' Roses were like no, and they would have. They would have done much better.
That comes back to authenticity, man. I think they were a very authentic gutter rock.
Dude, they were living in the freaking storage unit around Guitar Center Hollywood, like in a storage unit on Gardner Street. I actually visited there, like as a historical site of like, oh my God, they were just living, eating hot dogs out of this place and wrote Appetite for Destruction
and shit. Yeah, totally.
No, that record, man, that goes up because I'll go back to like, I'm not even a huge rock guy. Like I can say all this stuff, like, you know, John Bonham is, I think, the best rock drummer ever. Appetite for Destruction, like the band that comes to mind would be like Stones or the Aerosmith, right? When you think of GNR, like a kind of a synthesis of that kind of thing. And even Aerosmith, I like some of their 70s records like Rocks and Toys in the Attic are great records. But Appetite, I swear, is better. I can't think of another like come out of the gutter rock record that's better than Appetite for Destruction. I just can't.
I heard that record changed my life.
You play guitar, you play all kinds of, you play piano.
That's why I started playing guitar, man.
So could you think of a better school on rhythm guitars, left and right speaker? I mean, they're going off the Stones vibe, but you listen on headphones and you're like, Izzy's over here and Slash is over here. And it is a clinic in rhythm, 2-part rhythm guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, so you actually, when you said, you kind of started out in the rock world and the shredder stuff and all that, and you were really, what were some of your big guitar influences early on?
I was so young at the time that I was into all that glam stuff. Like, and at the time, I wouldn't have been able to tell you like Guns N' Roses is better than all these other ones. Cause I liked Motley Crue and I liked Poison. And, eventually I started getting into more like, I remember I was listening to Eric Johnson and Joe Satriani and Steve Vai. I never got quite as good as those, like that shreddy. Like I was a little more like Slash kind of thing. Like by the time I stopped playing guitar. So, I don't think I was old enough to really like have some deeper influences of like going back to the blues guys and listening to enough Zeppelin or so I don't know. Yeah. These days it's like, guitar, like shreddy stuff doesn't impress me at all. Like it's all about taste and it's all about vibe of the tone to me. I'm huge into, something you brought up earlier. And I kind of wanted to sort of piggyback on that was like the you were saying something about prog music. Like, if prog could become like the country, then it would all become lame. Like prog music, like everyone who comes up, and talks to me after shows back in the day, I mean, how many times are people going to say like, oh, you guys must love like Zappa and Crimson, right? And for whatever reason, we got into this whole thing from the bungle side of things. Like that was, so when Disco Volante came out, the reason I feel we kind of flowered is not because we were trying to copy bungle, but we started exploring the influences that they were pointing at. And on Disco Volante, we're talking a lot of obscure Ennio Morricone, Joe Meek, we're talking Peter Thomas Sound Orchestra, the 70s German film composer. And Trey was obviously able to point me in these directions once I met him. It's studying all that stuff, which made us like, as much as we're playing this technical music, we're all about like, dude, this guitar tone, like listen to this guitar tone. And prog music, it never quite hit the button for me as far as the full like recording aesthetic coming together. Like on California on Bungle, they ran almost everything. As hi-fi as that record says, they have a cheap Furman RV1 spring reverb unit that has like a bunch of noise like is like coming out of the unit, but it has that tone you hear with all that spring reverb and all the clip cloppy woodblock percussion stuff. It's all being run through the Furman spring reverb, and that's not to say that that's what Joe Meek was using, but it imparted this vibe. It's like Zappa would never freaking use this unit ever. Like King Crimson would never think of putting this on their. So even though a lot of our music is really notey and complicated, and it makes perfect sense to think, oh, you must have listened to this and this and this. It's always like our answer, and it's the same answer Bungle gave. They're always just like, no, we didn't listen to any of that stuff. Like I've heard Zappa and I appreciate it, but it was always lacked a little. How would you say, like a psychedelic glow to me? Like the best musicians you could ever have. But I like the recording aesthetic is the main thing that gets me interested in a recording. Obviously the composition itself, but prog to me in general is just very dry. It's very heady and it lacks a little bit of a frame around the canvas that I remedy through my sort of production techniques.
Yeah, like I don't know. I wouldn't call. I'm more art rock than prog rock to describe, say, like Pink Floyd. But one thing I love about Pink Floyd's one of my favorite bands, and
they've got great production.
It's all the production, the tone. It's all about taste. It's all about tone. I mean, Gilmour is one of my favorites. I mean, it's just awesome, immaculate. So yeah, I agree. And sometimes, especially nowadays, I think nowadays more than back then, because back then you had to operate off of real amps and guys. All those guys tended. It's amazing how many musicians
outboard
are
gear,
rocket scientists,
studio mixing boards, the preamps, the mics,
all this shit. And now it's like you plug into a little box and you got your thing and it's cool. But it's like it is more about like the technique of playing an 8-string instrument and doing all this flashy stuff. It's not so much about like the science of sound,
Right. Yeah, and that stuff does very little for me because I'm not, even though like I'm guilty of making songs that have a lot of notes and stuff, that's never really why I'm writing that song. It's more to like make a vibe. And I think I've gotten better at that over the years. Like I could look back at a bunch of records I've done, and I'll send you all the, I didn't send you the High Castle stuff, did I? I'll send you all the downloads we have.
Yeah.
But you'll hear it, man. This stuff is in spades on these recordings. I feel like I've really hit my stride with all these plugins that I have available to me now. I mean, I do the best I can through Outboard, but like I can make a tone sound like it's coming from Joe Meek.
I've been talking to so many guys now that were die hard, they've got, I mean, they still use it for recording, but they've got all this great Outboard stuff and all these great preamps and all.
That's
and they
awesome.
Totally mix in the box.
Oh yeah.
You're at a point now where all that stuff.
I actually mix to tape, but I just run my final mix through. I send it to Nashville to this guy who has a service who runs it through his 1/2-inch mix deck tape.
Sure, and
that to me adds a frame on a picture is what it does. It smooths it out, and you know what tape sounds like. It's subtle, and Joe Blow might not notice, but I notice. It makes it sound smoother. It's a little bit of compression, a little bit of warmth, and it just kind of flattens out those digital edges that kind of pop out.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you what do you use? Are you Pro Tools guy or what do you?
I'm a digital performer guy. It's like one of the least popular DAWs, but I've been using it since like 1999, and I can't believe they're still in business because they didn't take off like Logic did. And they should have because it's a better program than Logic. But it is. I mean, they still use it. The reason it's still alive is they use it for all the Hollywood stuff. That's the main thing that people score MIDI to. There's no better program for and I don't use it for, I've done a couple film things, but it's just a great DAW with a million features. And I'm sure all of them do the same thing, but I've never had a reason to go away from it. And I'm praying they do not go out of business because I do not want to learn Logic.
Yeah. Yeah. It sucks having to learn a new DAW.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm looking something up.
I was going to say my program files, you wouldn't believe it. They're just ridiculous. I've got probably a 2016 iMac, and it was kind of weird when they stopped being iMac's actually the most powerful computer you can get. I'm like, holy crap. Okay. I'll get an iMac then. So this computer I have now is it can do, I've never seen a computer that can do more plugins and more tracks and more everything. And I'll get to the point where I'm I need to start turning some of these 300 tracks into some, and now I do that. I imagine myself, imagine, back in the day being like Phil Spector or Brian Wilson, and all you have is that mixing board and it's going to go to tape. And right now I need to commit to a tone. I don't give a shit whether I can go back later and turn up the sax a little bit, whatever. I will commit. If I have 30 tracks for a string section, I have zero problem turning that into a stereo track and never looking back. That's some of the way that my computer survives some of my files.
Yeah, I think you have to do that.
Just commit. You're going to have to commit at some point. Kicking the can down the road till tomorrow, you eventually need to just commit to something. And that to me helps. You know what it's like when you're producing something. There's my stereo track of my string mix and it sounds perfect. The compression's just right and the EQ's right and it's got the perfect echo chamber reverb on it and it's done. Yeah.
Trust your gut, and if you're digging it, and
if you regret it, guess what? We regret. I could have regrets about every record I've ever done.
No matter what I do, I don't like it anyway. So why not just do it and do it and move on? You're always learning. I think that's the.
You're
big
probably
thing,
the same way. While you're making a song, for me, what I'm doing, it sounds different to me. It sounds magical, and I'm super engrossed by it. And then when you're done, it's dead to me. I don't ever go back unless I'm showing someone else what I've done. You need to hear this thing I did, but I'm never let me listen to that song I recorded in 2005. I just don't do it. There's something about the process that is magical to me. And then there's almost something kind of sad when it's over, right? It's just it's done. And now I can never listen to it again.
I also think when time goes by, sometimes you can forget all that silly shit. That's 1 dB here.
Yeah.
And you listen to it 5-10 years later, none of that matters. You just get the overall vibe of it. This was cool. This is cool. You're not,
hopefully
I think that you're so attached
good,
to it at the moment. I think that you have to get away from it, at least for me. When it's done, you're kind of ugh, all right, I don't want to listen to that shit for a while.
Right.
I was gonna, dude. So on Wikipedia, where was that? Where I saw it? Where did I see this? I just thought it was cool because it was saying something about some genres. You guys, so Estradasphere were influenced by influenced by many different artists from many different genres. Oh wait, blah blah blah. God damn it! Something about. The band mixes several genres in its songs. The band, self-proclaimed inventor of bizarre genres such as Bulgarian surf. That just sounds Romanian gypsy metal. I love this is my favorite. Spaghetti Eastern.
Right. We do have a Spaghetti Eastern song on the
That's
last
the Marconi influence, right?
Well,
Mixed with some gypsy stuff.
No, you're missing it. It's we had changed members. We had a couple new members. So one of our members we got for our last record, our saxophone player, John Hooley, left, and he's like a musical force to be reckoned with. He's the kind of person you need to replace with two people just to have any semblance of normalcy. So we replaced him with like a guy who could play anything on keyboards and accordion. And then this guy who was actually a great guitar player, kind of virtuoso, kind of like GIT kind of guy. But he'd be like, no, like Jason is like more of the like, tasty jazz kind of thing, but he could play whatever you wanted. So but he also was a virtuoso at the Japanese shamisen. So the song called Those Who Know on Palace of Mirrors is entirely focused on the shamisen, but it's got this Ennio Morricone type of arrangement around the shamisen. So that's the Spaghetti Eastern. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Eastern could be anything. In this case, it's Japan.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely Eastern, right? I mean,
and we've definitely done the Romanian metal. There's another song of Romanian gypsy music. Like that's one of our favorite things. But to be authentic at that genre, you actually have to like live there. Their ornamentations are out of this world. Nobody would ever understand them unless you lived on the wagon and whatever. But we actually had some guests come in. We had a cymbalum player. We had a guest violinist who taught our violinist how to play this way. But we also had him as the main violin on the track. Wow. And then we did our sort of death metal over top of it, which I don't think anyone's ever taken an authentic Romanian gypsy tune and then turned it metal.
Right.
High Castle's doing more song. We have a song coming out on our record we're working on now that is like you wouldn't believe these guys we have playing on the record. Like Stian, the accordionist from Norway, he knows everyone. He's like, oh, you need a violinist from Bulgaria? Like, I'll call up my friend, this guy. Yeah. The guy sends us his tracks. I'm like, can you send us a video with that? Just so we can like use it when we make a video. And it's just this 60-year-old Bulgarian violinist. And he is playing the most complicated thing you've ever heard in your life as if it was nothing. Like It is breathing for this guy. Yeah.
Golly, man. That's amazing, dude. So when you say are you recording, you've done a couple of singles, are you doing an album?
So we've done 4 singles, and we're creating 10 songs. That's going to be our first record. We've just committed to, releasing it on this Australian label called Art as Catharsis, which is a really cool label that I'd never heard of, but they've got a really cool thing going on over there in Australia. And they also have some international reach as well. And, a band like ours, like since we're not going to be playing live, like we're really going to need to hit the like PR stuff and digital marketing kind of thing. But so we're going to release 10 songs. Everything we're doing is based on this Philip K. Dick book, Radio Free Albemuth. I don't know how we even settled on that. I love Philip K. Dick. But there's 30 chapters in this book, so we're just like, cool, it's going to be a triple album, like 10 chapters each. So we've taken notes on every chapter. We've figured out which song is describing which thing. So sometimes, you reverse engineer things philosophically. Like, I wish I could tell you I didn't write one note of music before, and now everything was 100% from the book. But sometimes you kind of like, that would work well as that, or that kind of thing. But it kind of gives you a framework to go by that, like, oh, this is the chapter, where the pink beam that was shooting across the universe, gave you the intuition that your son had a hernia that needed immediate surgery for, or whatever. That's diagnosing Johnny. But then now this chapter is going to be, the days of blue jeans were gone. And we have all these most of our music is instrumental, but we do have some guest sort of vocals here and there. Mm-hmm. Someone I think she's from Austin, actually. Do you know Caitlin O'Connor?
I don't think so.
Okay. I think she's from Austin.
Wait a minute.
Well,
wait. Yeah.
She's
in
dude. All these scenes. I see her.
Yeah. Okay. I know exactly who you're talking about. Holy shit.
She, I asked her to record on a track on one of our singles.
That's
the
awesome.
Days of Blue Jeans Were Gone. And what I was asking her to do was like a Morricone type of erotica thing, which has if you listen to some of that lesser known Morricone stuff, it has this real sort of South American bossa nova vibe with these really deep chord progressions and the vocal that's very laid back. There's not like we're circling back to the vibrato thing. There's almost no vibrato. It's just like I was asking her to do that kind of vibe. You put a bunch of reverb on it and some pre-delay on it and put that part to the right and put an echo chamber over here. And she freaking nailed it, dude. I don't know if she'd ever sung that style before.
Wow. That's fucking awesome. It took me a sec, but I mean, yeah, I know her. She plays in a band here, rock band and everything. That's pretty pure. Yeah. And I think that's how I met her initially, was through both various.
And she's
Facebook
very active
groups.
online in all the sort of bungle groups.
Yeah, for sure.
She's awesome though.
Cool. Yeah, awesome, man. That's really cool. Very cool. I love the featuring thing too. Just featuring different musicians and especially with stuff like that when you're moving in all these different styles. You know, we had a guest not too long ago that's well, I guess it has been a while now, a pianist, and he just traveled all through South America, hitting up all these different countries. His new album's going to be called Roots of the World, and he's just all these different worldly styles with like these sort of like, you know, really pronounced guys in these different regions and
so
you know,
cool.
countries and cultures. Yeah, for sure, man.
Wow.
Dude, I can't wait to hear it. So you guys are in the writing process right now.
No, we've written everything. It's the the big log jam is on my end with producing it. I mean, some of it's like the drummer, you know, we were going to send him to, he's actually like Dave Murray. He lives in Santa Barbara, but he's the original Estradasphere drummer. So he's actually invested in a setup that's good enough to record at home, and through my studio magic, I will make it at least sound like it was recorded in like a $300 a day studio. not even, you know what I mean?
You've got your $300 a day plug-in.
I could send him. I mean, I'm a huge fan of like going and doing it on a Neve mixing board and getting all the mics. But this day and age, with the sort of aesthetic stuff we're talking about, and it would take him, who knows, all day, but now he can kind of relax and do like 4 takes at home, send them to me.
Especially drums, man. That's the big thing
so
about
expensive.
That kind of stuff is like, you've got to go in there and you've got to get it. And
you've got to be ready.
Super pressure cooker. And if everyone's, and if everyone's not 100%, then it's just like, I mean, then you're the
and I don't know if you've ever experienced
editing.
this, but like, I love studio environments. So I'm like in hog heaven. I don't even notice when they play like shit, 'cause I'm like, this sounds awesome. Then I get it back and I'm like, why am I moving something every freaking bar?
Yeah.
I have to sit there and Frankenstein it, 'cause I was so in hog heaven that I didn't notice that he wasn't grooving, or maybe your click's not loud enough or something. But
I've done enough drum editing to know I don't like drum editing.
I have done so. It's like in a weird addiction though, because once you start editing, nobody ever plays it as good enough. I mean, Steely Dan is a great example of that, right? They would use the best studio musicians in the world, like all through the 70s, they would throw them out. They would like bring them in and pay like $10,000 for that day and just be like, not really feeling that one. We'll call you maybe for this other song we've got you in mind. And they would just completely scrap that and bring in a new group. But they got so obsessed with that idea that they ended up releasing, it was like their last album of their era, Gaucho, where they made the first drum machine that ever existed because they were so obsessed with perfection. It's actually a great record, but there's something very sterile about the drums.
Like kind of like the Injustice thing, right? It's
but at least they're using actual musicians. So like they have these great songs on Gaucho, but there's this cheesy pre-80s drum machine that had invented them. So they had this guy like programming it on like a old school Atari thing. Yeah. And they spent, if you read about their studio logs, they would spend almost the entire time like figuring out how to make edits through this archaic system. But, something that just sounds ridiculous. And their album before that, Asia, is like known as their best record. We're like, what the hell was wrong with that? That is like the best players ever. Bernard Purdy on drums, Steve Gadd, Chuck Rainey on bass, Larry Carlton on guitar. They had like the, Michael McDonald did the background vocals. Just the who's who of it. But they were so picky about it, that wasn't even good enough. That if there was a button called like perfection, they just took it too far. They just kept turning it up instead of settling at that happy medium, which is like, yeah, that was great. Asia was awesome. Just stick with that, you know?
Yeah. Well, but that's part of like, it's maybe a catch-22. Like sometimes you're going to disappoint the fans. Sometimes you're going to fall flat. I mean, I think I always talk about Metallica is probably the greatest popular example of that ever, because they've created and written and, recorded some of the greatest hard rock metal albums ever.
Pretty much.
Undisputably. Yeah. But also some of the worst garbage that's ever been laid to tape, so to speak, in my opinion.
When the muse leaves, it's never pretty. Ooh. I mean, we could look at Elton John. We could look at Stevie Wonder. We could look at people that it's just the way it is in this type of in rock music in particular, and pop music. There's just a point where you peak. I'm kind of glad that I'm not quite doing that I'm doing this weird, because I feel like you can have a longer muse if you're doing this kind of weird music than you can in rock. Like,
well, then you have guys though, but like then Thelonious Monk just was like one day was like, I'm done. Like after all this brilliant shit, he just was like,
I don't know enough of his history. I do like Monk. That makes sense if he did, but pop and rock specifically seemed like show me one pop rock guy that did something better after 40 than before 40. I don't think you could.
You're always hungry in the beginning, so you either come out with a great debut album, like a 1-2 punch, like all the great bands, they always have that, and some of them keep going for several. And then
Brian Wilson was making Smile at 24. That's the best thing he ever did. Like, I mean, obviously he had mental health issues and some drug problems.
Prince doing shit when he was a teenager, playing everything. Yeah. I mean, those guys, the musical genius guys that do it, Freddie Mercury, they just do it all.
Yeah. There's just a sort of a mythological sort of Icarus, fly too close to the sun eventually, whether it's like drugs or whether it's the...
But once you do that too, like it's got to be hard for an artist to get that, both in terms of like creating something so big and being so successful, because then you're like, well, where the fuck can I go now? Right.
Yeah.
It's like you can't, but hey, I would rather create something magical.
It's like Billy Joel now, all he writes is classical music. He'll still go do stadium tours because they'll pay him millions of dollars. Yeah. I think that's a very natural place to end up.
Yes, totally.
I've got no other songs I can write. I've got nothing to say. I'll still go play at, Wembley Stadium and sell it out because there's a bunch of idiots that want to see a 70-year-old Billy Joel, But, why I would do it too if I was him.
Looks like Anakin Skywalker in Return of the Jedi at this point.
But, the last decent record he made was probably, I forget what that record's even called, but it's like 1984. Like that was the last one that was like even halfway. Yeah. There was a couple after that, and then he just stopped, and he's just like, now I only do classical music. It's actually pretty good. Some of his classical music.
Yeah, and he's great.
Not going to blow Mozart out of the water or anything like that, but that's a natural place to go from pop music, in my opinion, rather than just keep writing bad songs that from 50 years old that.
Well, and the guys that had the few hits that really couldn't write any more good songs, they went and did the bro country thing.
yeah.
Let me get on this Nashville market. Hey, so okay, we talked about starting out in the shredder guitar player stuff, but then obviously you're super influenced by a lot of worldly music and composers, classical music being a very broad term, film scores. You use Marconi a lot. So who are some big influences in those realms?
So Morricone, obviously, there's a whole list of people that are in that pantheon of Italian film composers that I was turned on to a lot of them by this guy Alan Bishop, who was part of a legendary West Coast group called the Sun City Girls, and he also runs this label called Sublime Frequencies, where he spends his entire year like traveling around the country or around the world, and he'll go to a country, to Cambodia, for like 6 months and just collect music for 6 months.
Wow.
And he'll come home and turn it into one CD of a collage, and that's it.
Wow.
But it's freaking nuts, man. Look up Sublime Frequencies. It's like avant-garde ethnomusicology, where if Cambridge University was going to go over there like, hi, we're from Cambridge and we're here to study your tribe. Will you allow us to record you? Like, he's like just going to go there and just like take the bargain basement, like tape bins, and do some shortwave radio and have someone drive him out into the bush and pay the tribe. Can I hang out with you guys for a couple days? Mm-hmm. But it's a totally different perspective. But he not only does all that sort of weird ethnomusicology stuff, but he is probably the world's greatest music collector I've ever seen. He collects mostly Italian soundtracks and things like that, but he's got tens of thousands of them.
Jeez.
He made me privy to his collection when I moved to Seattle. He's like, here, want to copy my collection? I'm like, sure. I'm still listening to what he gave me, but there are dozens of composers from that from that Italian scene that Morricone was from, whether it's Piero Piccioni or who's the Bruno Nicolai is the guy who arranged all Morricone's music. Gosh, I'd have to pull up my list, but there's you wouldn't believe how great the song could be. Shitty. And the vibe, talk about aesthetic. It's like, oh, listen to that sound of that B3 organ. Sometimes I have to ask myself, is that a good song or does it just sound amazing? Like that's every song they did back in those days. They were sort of the equivalent of like what Steely Dan was doing or Brian Wilson was doing of bringing in the best studio musicians of Italy at that time. And they happen to be very influenced by America. Like that's another thing that pops up in Alan's stuff is like, wow, listen to this Cambodian rock. They're still doing like their Cambodian scales and all this stuff, but they're trying to be rock and it just turns out awesome. Like, I didn't think America could be that good of an influence, but musically it is. I mean, you go to a cafe in Amsterdam, you know, they're not playing music from their country. They're playing Stevie Wonder or they're playing, you know what I mean? America really has that reach of like that pioneering spirit that the world, as much as they might hate us politically, like they just always look to us artistically.
Yeah. I mean, there's especially, I mean, blues and jazz.
Rock, blues,
basically, well, that bled into that, right? So in that sense, it's like, I mean, we don't want to sound super, you know, the center of the universe or anything. It's not like things weren't happening in other places, but that American influence is just in the 20th century and now in the 21st century is just influenced.
And there's something to it. There was some great stuff. There isn't any more. I can't think of anything more that, you know, as far as popular music that's been dead for. I kind of feel like Nirvana was kind of the end of popular music. I don't know. I know there's good stuff underground, but if you're talking about what's like in the charts, like Nirvana was like, cool, we're going to kill glam rock and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I know you like Nirvana. I've heard your covers on a piano, which are awesome. The cool chord progressions and melodies. And you're like, I don't even understand how that works. But like everything that came after, like they just seemed to pave way for all the Bushes and the Nickelbacks.
And I was always kind of like Nirvana when it came initially. I was like, because I was starting to play guitar and basically anything that didn't have guitar solos, I was like, yeah, this sucks. You know, like you know what I mean? I was all about Metallica and like Guns N' Roses.
Nirvana was like anti-guitars, like the one note solos. And feedback
totally got into Satriani. But the thing, what was really cool about the late 80s, from the Appetite to the Nevermind to the mid 90s, that whole realm where like a billion great records came out, it was in the mainstream, like grunge and rock and hard rock. And it was all in the mainstream. And there was pop and hip hop and all these other things too. But that ever since probably the mid 90s and then the catastrophes like, Limp Bizkit just destroyed everything. Bro hip hop metal crap, ruined everything. And so there's still great pop music. There's still cool things that happen, but none of it's not like this giant explosion in the mainstream like it was. And I feel like, the last time that was a thing was that whole early 90s thing. And Nirvana just kind of became the band that was the face of that. But really, there was everything was like the Use Your Illusion albums, the Black Album. I mean, everything. It was fucking incredible.
Which would have been much better if they were so freaking, if Axl wasn't such an egomaniac and they just turned it into one record, because there's about one record full of great songs on there. I don't need the alternate mix of Don't Cry. I don't need,
My World can take a hike. Yeah.
Yeah. There's about one. Estranged is unbelievable. It's just what a pop song. I mean,
I still think it's too good to put on one record. There's some stuff for sure, but man, a lot of it is pretty fucking good, dude. In my opinion,
I remember when there's an interview with Sorum when he got into the band. He's like, "Oh, I joined Guns N' Roses," and I'm like, "We're gonna join a rock band," and now there's like a harmonica player and a horn section and background vocalists. And they're like, yeah, exactly. Songs. And he's like, I thought I was joining a rock band because like that's what happens to any band. You go from the gutter to having all the resources.
Oh, well, and Axl. Yeah. I mean, it just became this massive diva.
He turned the band into like, oh, no, I own the band and you guys don't even have a part of it. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Now they're touring again post COVID.
Yeah. I saw that, man. No, pretty crazy. I still love those albums, but it definitely became
I do too. I don't think they're all like, I think one great record in there, if you had, well, and that's back to the Estranged and November Rain, which I don't even love the production on. I'd rather hear like, if someone could have produced that more like a Beach Boys Pet Sounds type of thing instead of the drum fills that keep going It's just and the cheesy like rolling string sounds and like it's awesome. Do you ever hear the original demo of that song where he's just him at the piano? Holy hell, it's just him in his apartment screaming, playing the piano, but still singing the melody. It's one of the best performances I've ever heard in my life. Check it out.
Damn.
November Rain demo. Yeah. I wish they would have really done it like that. It was
it's kind of like, there's a Nothing Else Matters recording of just acoustic guitar and a full-on orchestra.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because they buried those strings. Cool. They were kind of embarrassed of the strings. I heard
that. They brought in the whole thing. Originally, that was
like, let's just kind of keep them down a little. I could hear their strings, but I couldn't hear the parts.
Well, because at the time, it's like, Metallica is selling out. They're playing strings.
You weren't even supposed to sing. Like, most people didn't, like, James Hetfield is very melodic. Like, that's the thing. Like, I don't know a more thrash band that's more melodic than they are. Because
I would actually argue Megadeth is, I always say, I think Megadeth's a great melody.
Like, when he's like his song it's always kind of high. Like James will be, and the passion play. It's like, it's not there. But the way his timbre of his voice is, it sounds low, but it's actually not that low. I mean, he's not doing like a Rob Halford or anything, but it's kind of up there in the middle, but he has this like Cowardly Lion kind of vibe going on.
He had the Cowardly Lion look in the early 90s too.
Yeah, I know. That's the reason I said that. But he just, the harmonics coming out of his high notes are kind of low, and it just sounds lower. Like they didn't drop tune until probably what's that song on the Black Album? I think
God
they were all
failed.
just an E.
They went down a whole step on the God That Failed, I think.
No, but there was one of their hit songs. Sad but
Sad
True.
But True was down. Yeah.
That's the first time I ever noticed there's anything besides low E.
Oh, you know what? Actually,
I might be wrong.
There's one other one. There's one other one. It's what is that song? It's on
Harvester of Sorrow.
No, it's on Master Puppets. It's the thing that should not be. The thing that should not be is Drop
Yeah,
B.
that's a cool tune.
Yeah, but anyway, man. No, I agree totally, and it's so underrated. And it's great that metal stuff became kind of mainstream, deservingly so. Great songs, great songwriters, everything sonically about it. I mean, the Bob Rock production on that and stuff. And I mean, speaking of that guy, Coley saving Motley Crue's ass when he came along and just produced the fuck out. I heard like with that, you had like Vince Neil would sing like one note per day. Bob Rock like, do it again.
2 notes. Doesn't he only have 2 notes?
Yeah, but even that, he had to spend like weeks.
I think he only has a minor third, kind of like Rob Zombie. Yeah. Like
Rob Zombie is the most monotone ever.
No, he has the minor third, just like Vince Neil does, but it's up 2 octaves from where Rob Zombie is.
Well, that's where Vince Neil can sing nowadays. I haven't seen it, but apparently he just came and did a show and just said, sorry, everybody, and left stage. Did y'all hear this?
Have you seen the Kickstart My Heart where there's like some thing that went viral? This was a couple of years ago, but he's like, yeah, it was awesome. It was like transcendently bad.
Yeah, Vic, you got to go check that out, man. Just watch Vince Neil recent
Kickstart
singing.
My Heart, Mishap or whatever they call it.
Then
it's so bad.
Go watch that and then wash my ears out with some Anthrax.
Dude, right? Like, here's the thing, though. Motley, like all these fucking bands, Ozzy's done it like 500 times. Like, they didn't 2 years ago or some shit. Motley Crue had their big farewell, we're done show at the Staples Center, and now they're fucking touring again. Or maybe it's just Vince Neil. Maybe it's Vince Neil with his own band.
Who is going to these shows? Because even if it's a band, like I like Guns N' Roses, we've talked about it the whole time here. I'm not going to go see them. I'm still not going to go see them when they come by Coors Field here. I'm just not. It's like I don't see what that holds for me.
I'd go see him. I mean,
if someone gave me the tickets, but I'm not paying $150 to go sit in the nosebleeds to see Guns N' Roses.
That's the problem. It's all fucking
damn.
I would go for Slash because I know Axl's going to sound like shit. Like you can't sing like that anymore. And he's not as bad as Vince Neil.
Dude, I saw him in '92 with Metallica and Faith No More. It was
that was good. Me too. I was at that show in L.A. That was awesome. Yeah,
God, it was so fucking good. And then I saw them again, but it wasn't, the real Guns N' Roses. It was Axl with, the other bands. No, it wasn't even Buckethead. It was Bumblefoot, Ron Thal, which is awesome. I love that dude. He's a great player, cool guy. But yeah, I mean, it's just not the same, not quite the same.
Slash has tone.
Axl's all right.
I've never met anyone. When you shake his hand, Slash, he's got the strongest grip. He crushes your hand. He doesn't even know he's doing it. But he's got so much tone in his left hand. Yeah. His vibrato. He grew up with a guitar with one string. So the reason he can play so melodically is he's got the linearity of guitar, which is something that gets ignored a lot on guitar. You're like, I can just go up here.
That's what
you don't
why I've always
actually
been
learn
so
how
influenced by
melodies
him.
work.
Yeah,
dude.
Always
so
melody, man. I mean, the melody is so good that Axl, in all of his Roger Waters, glory at that point in his career, thanked Slash on the Use Your Illusion albums. There's a thank you to Slash for his beautiful melodies, on
Strange. I think it's for the Strange guitar solo. Yeah, it is. Yeah. The Dolphins or whatever.
Yeah. Oh my God. Jumping off the fucking aircraft carrier, little Converse sneaker with his name on it.
$3 million video.
Right. I mean, that was just crazy shit, man.
The excess. The perils of rock and roll decadence, I think that he says right on Pretty Tied Up there is what they're victim to of that entire record and that entire era.
Absolutely.
And Axl,
I love that tune. I love Locomotive.
That's a good tune.
Dude, Izzy was also such a huge force in that band as a songwriter.
Loss when they lost him because his songwriting and just that vibe, he kept that like down to the dirt.
What made them
Richards type of vibe?
That's what made them so great. You had this punk rocker Duff. You had this kind of
great bass player, actually.
Yeah, great bass player, great musician.
So in tune with the kick drum. Like, have you ever heard
the story about them?
You hear every note with the kick drum.
Well, there's a great story about that I think Duff talked about in his book, where when they first they got down there and there was like Slash is this great guitarist, and then there's like Steven Adler who's this metal guy, Duff's the punk rocker dude from Seattle, you got Axl, you got Izzy who's the classic rock Stones vibe, the songwriter, and you get them all together and you get this perfect mismatch of the glam and the metal and the punk and the whole thing, and,
classic rock.
But what they used to do, like, I can't remember, it was Duff and Izzy or something, where they would actually take parts of Steven Adler's kit and like hide his shit and steal his shit so he couldn't, because he wanted to do the double bass metal shit and all that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they were like, nah, dude, because it was all about, and that's a lot of that credit goes to Duff, right? About all that syncopated, kick and bass working together, all that kind of stuff. And you think about
Sorum was very precise, but there's something about the groove of Adler that was just hard to replicate. And even his tones were awesome. Or Matt Sorum's tone, I didn't like the snare drum sound on the Illusions at all.
It's something
about it. It's bright and kind of thin.
Yeah, it's very prominent on the album.
The Appetite one has this low mid thing to it, like a thump that just sounds so freaking good. But you got to give Adler credit. It's not a rock band unless you've had a coke-induced stroke.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Like one of I opened up for Adler's Appetite one time, and it was actually pretty fun. Like he was a really nice guy.
Seems like a cool guy. Seems very nice,
very nice guy.
He just took it way too far.
But it was really funny because the band, I didn't really know, but it was old like kind of rockers from those different like Chips Enough, or Enough's Enough, Chips Enough.
Oh, and oh my God,
they all have that voice like CeCe DeVille. They all have
CeCe's a New Yorker. He always had that tone of real good band. Yeah. funny stuff, dude.
Yeah, but
back in day voice.
Exactly. All those guys.
He wasn't actually a smoker. It was mostly CeCe was mostly New York, and then mixed with the rock and roll lifestyle. So like New Yorker, you kind of have it as almost a default, the harsh sort of guttural sound. Boston, New York, Jersey.
Speaking of New York, a band that I really love is Typo Negative. You know much about those guys?
I don't know too much about the,
it's a really cool
I've
blend.
Heard the band, I've heard the name forever, and I couldn't pick a song from theirs out of a lineup if I had to.
What I love about that band is it's kind of there's an interesting, I mean, they don't sound anything like Guns N' Roses, obviously, but they kind of goth, but like you can tell where the influences come from. They're super influenced by classic rock, and in their style, like you would never think that on the surface, but when you kind of get into the band, they would always cover old stuff in their own way. But you hear a lot of that in the songwriting, and it's just like really, really interesting. But
nice, dude.
Just a unique sound that I really like. Yeah, I'd recommend checking that band out.
Nice.
Yeah, dude. Shit. Well, I gotta check out like 1,000 Italian composers apparently, because that's where it's at.
Dude, I should. Yeah, I could probably. We'll talk offline, but I could probably furnish you with some stuff.
So you guys, I mean, I guess with everyone spread out, there's no intention of playing actual shows.
I mean, it would some kind of miracle would have to happen. Like it really takes off, and there's, because I mean, the way I record too is like, I punch in so much stuff. It's like, I've got all these, I could play this bass line easily, but I would need to practice it and blah, blah, blah. And it's like just as easy for me to play these 4 bars and then those 4 bars. And the thing with our group is like chord progressions. Like that's one of my biggest things I feel like I know about. Like, oh, you said, oh, you're a bass player. I said, no, actually, mostly I'm a producer. But like my number one skill as far as like music and the arranging is I've studied so many deep chord progressions, whether it's like Brian Wilson or Steely Dan or Morricone, these people that are using these, they're pretty much jazz progressions, but they're not used in a way that they would use them in jazz. So any extension is on the table, whether we're talking, you know, inversions with different alternate bass notes or sharp 11s or flat 13s or sharp 9, sharp 11. I try to find ways to reharmonize a melody. So if you hear the regular melody, right, there's a million ways you could reharmonize beneath that melody to get it away from the sort of standard chord change that you hear as like the basis of the melody. Mm-hmm. So I could show you sometimes some of the chord charts if you listen along to some of the High Castle stuff. And it just sounds good enough where you might not even really notice it, but you're like, holy crap, that chord progression is really, really out there.
I love that. And I was just doing this the other day, and I don't do it enough like I should, but sometimes you just go down a rabbit hole on different songs that you're, oh, I love this song. Oh, I remember that song. And just start pop stuff too, you know, like, it was, Duran Duran, Ordinary World was one. A great song, you know, and, Elton John, what was that? A Lion King song, the Can You Feel the Love?
Can You Feel the Love?
It's amazing because on the surface, a lot of times, right, you're like, the 1-5, 6-4, that, whatever, right? Like, and then you get into the song and you're like, oh, fuck, wow, nice passing tone. Oh, neat little trick. Oh, key change there. And there's it never ceases to amaze me how many like progressive, so to speak, elements actually do pop up in good pop music, whether it be the Beatles or the Beach Boys. I mean,
and sometimes it could be contrived, and other times people might be naturally. Like I'll do a thing where I write the melody out, and then I'll try voicings beneath it. So I'll say, "Here's an F sharp." I'll just start arbitrarily. I'll say, "Let's just pretend that's a 9 of an E minor." And then I'm going to add a 6 in there too. So it's going to be an E minor 6-9. That's going to be our first thing. Then I see the next note is a D sharp. Oh, that is almost like E minor to B7, you know. So, but let's not make it a B7. Let's go tritone away from there and do the tritone sub and do an F7 sharp 11, but with a different bass note. Let's put A in the bass, and then I go back and I'm like, that one's a little bit no, and I eventually find the one that kind of pops out of the mud. And the funny thing is the melody still carries through. I mean, you hear jazz pianists do that all the time where they're just reharmonizing and you're like, what the hell chords are those? That's so advanced. I can't even tell you what they're doing, but that's what they're doing without even thinking about it. But for me, I'm like, I need to sit down and figure out what kind of alternate sort of reharmonization I could do of this melody.
It makes me think of, did you ever have, or are you aware of this thing called the Guitar Handbook?
No, but I think I've seen it.
Yeah, I just remember when I started playing, I got this thing called the Guitar Handbook, and it's a great book, and it goes through all these different things about playing and harmony and rhythm and gear, but at the very beginning, they just talk about a handful of guitar players from Zappa, Van Halen, Steve Vai, Chuck Berry. It goes, maybe 20 different guys. One of them in there is John McLaughlin, and there's some quote or something. He's like, it's just so annoying because he says something like, you really have to know this and that. Like how a B flat sounds over a, B sus2 flat 9 sharp, blah, blah, all this crazy ass shit. He's like, it's really not that hard. You just have to apply yourself. And it's just like, what? I don't even know what you're talking about yet. Like,
I run into that all the time. So like when we were talking about the harmonic series stuff earlier, it is very easy for me to get ahead of myself that like, I know I could explain this to you easily, but it might take a couple hours. But like when you only have 5 minutes or something, I do get a lot of people like, what? And I'm like, oh yeah, this is not something everybody knows, No,
I love geeking out on that stuff. The willingness maybe of me to like study and retain it is another thing, but just I'm always fascinated to just sort of like nerd out on any of this, whether it's the accurate math or the fake math that we've created in the Western music system, either or. I really enjoy it, and I think it's such a
it's a wormhole because it takes a while to
thing.
I am actually hoping to I keep coming back to the idea that I should probably start one of these stupid online courses. I just would need to really
that'd be awesome.
Figure out the right model, and I wouldn't want to charge too much. I would be more interested in like getting people in and charging as little as I could to want you to come back. Mm-hmm. That seems to be sort of the route that High Castle's actually going, because you're never going to you see a lot of people having a lot of success you know, in that realm these days, you're not going to make the money off of album sales. You're just not.
Oh yeah.
And if you have something like the thing, I could be using the songs I'm producing to like actually show people, here's how I set up my, you know, I don't need to necessarily even make a different scenario. I can just screen share and have a little picture of me in the corner and be like, here's how I set up my gain structure, my master bus and all that stuff. But then you could use it to do chord changes and start from beginning to end, harmonic series. There could be all these branches of it. But the problem is like, I need to have the time to produce that content if people are, you know, right now I work, so I'd have to, you know, figure out, can I phase that out or not? I mean, I work 3 days a week as a graveyard ER nurse, you know, 12-hour shifts. So I have a lot of off time, but I also have kids and stuff. So can't just do music all the time without getting, you know, in trouble.
Yeah. I wanted to, it's got a good segue. I was going to bring up the Invincible Czars because, didn't they tour with you guys years ago?
You know, I'm not sure.
Or maybe they played some regional shows or something.
Yes, exactly. I think they probably played at least Austin. They may have followed us to Denton and possibly Dallas. Okay. And you'd have to ask Josh. Is his name, right? Yeah. You'd have to ask, cool guy. You'd have to ask him if there were more than that, because they may have come out to LA at some point and play with us. I can't. Yeah, it's all a little foggy at this point. But
yeah. Well, it was a long time ago, right? I mean,
whatever he says. Yeah, no, they were always a highlight for us to play with them.
He was saying, I think opening for you guys, he was saying like every night was just like, oh God, how do you, or seeing every night when you guys played, it was just kind of like, wow, you know what I mean? I mean,
right.
Which is who you want to play with, though. You want to play with, you know, inspiring musicians who are amazing.
I mean, that's I went and checked out Secret Chiefs 3 and Dead Cross, and I'm not a huge Dead Cross, not a huge Dead Cross fan. And Secret Chiefs were really on point on that, like really playing well. And I think Patton even said something like, "Oh God, following these guys, this is just horrible."
Well, that's the thing with like, I mean, you got Patton and you got Lombardo, and you've got a lot of star power in that band.
I think I'm getting old. I don't know what it is. I'm 43. Like
Dead Cross is great. I mean, it's not like,
as much as I come from like the crazy, like I want everything. Like I'd rather listen to Ennio Morricone these days than Dead Cross. Maybe it's just I'm getting old and I want the music to sound nicer. But I'm finding, and I think that's a normal part of aging, even in this genre, right?
Totally.
I'm not looking to have my skull crushed in. Like I did that plenty, you know.
Well, one thing I think is cool is the fact that, you know, these guys are all, you know, hitting 50 or a little above 50. And so then Dead Cross pops out and does this really heavy, you know, just gross kind of thing. And then right on the heels of that, Bungle comes out and puts out this fucking thrash metal shit that they wrote when they were kids. And it's just, it's not, I mean, it's perfect for Mr. Bungle, right? Like, cause what do we all want to see? We want to see them like play their old shit. They don't do it. They just come play a whole thrash metal album of shit we've never heard.
Yeah, if I had my choice, I don't care about them playing their old songs at all. I would like a new record of whichever direction it goes.
Well, like, it's metal. I mean, that's what it is.
Let's hope. Yeah, I see that to them. Like they did it really well and they pulled it really well. And I always loved the metal influence in them, but that for them is kind of like reliving their teenage years and the thrash.
Yeah, totally.
I don't put on thrash metal for enjoyment. Like I just don't. I can handle it when it's an influence of something, but, and the sound of that record is great. Like they did everything perfectly, but it's not like the thing I'm going to pull out, you know, on a Sunday afternoon and be like, let me listen to this, you know, teenage thrash metal thing. Like they pulled it off perfectly, but as far as what I would want to hear,
some
as an
easy
old school
listening,
fan,
like Disco Volante.
The Disco Volante, like Chemical Marriage, you've got Violence and Domestica. There's some harsh stuff, but a lot of it is actually, at least for my warped mind, kind of easy to listen to.
I don't know, and I don't want to like be like, hey, go watch my fucking YouTube videos, but like, I thought it was really fun. I did 2 covers off that album. I did on acoustic.
Oh, you did Retro Vertigo, right?
Well, I did that one, but I did off Disco Volante. I did, I'm trying to think of the song.
Oh yeah, that's not Disco Jesus.
Fucking damn it. What's My Mom Is Better.
After School Special, that Bear
one.
Song. Yeah.
And so I did that, but I also did, a cover of, The last Merry Go Bye Bye on
Merry Go Bye
piano.
Bye. That's a great tune.
And
great
man,
tune.
I just love the melody. I've always loved that song.
I love the innocence he sings it with too.
Yeah,
like,
it's so
very
super quirky, intentionally quirky.
Telescope.
Yeah,
like,
dorky.
You're like,
just
this
silly.
sounds like a teenager, in his bedroom, like it's just wondering about the universe. Or
It's
something.
like I feel like there's moments like that on that album where that's actually great, like pop. It could be a great pop production if you wanted it to be, but it's Mr.
Sure.
Bungle, and they did, Mr. Bungle. But forget what I was going to say now. But blah blah, Mr. Bungle. There was something else. Vic, help.
Yes, Mr. Bungle.
Vic. This is what Vic chimes in with.
Yeah, I just repeat stuff.
They opened for us once. Did you know that? For Estradasphere?
Mr. Bungle did?
Yeah.
How the hell did that happen?
It was for the California tour. They wanted a secret show.
Oh, nice.
And of course, the word got out and it was completely packed and everything. But
where was that at?
In Santa Cruz at this old defunct club called Palookaville. But it held about 600 people. But pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Just like being able to say Bungle opened for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you guys open for Bungle? No, they opened for us.
No, we never opened for them. Yeah,
were.
that would have been cool. They would have taken us on California tour, but no, that didn't happen.
Man. Buzz did an acoustic tour from the Melvins and did he like a storyteller thing. Do you remember that by any chance? Or anyway, this was several years back, and
I think I might have heard about it, but
so he told a story about when they opened for, maybe they had done a runner a tour. And
is this the thing on YouTube where he talks about the band that was booing the Melvins and Bungle came out and just did their we're not going to play a song for you.
Just played noise for the entire time. And what was so great was the people, because it was Mr. Bungle, everyone was like, yeah, woo! And they're just noise. And so it goes for 5 minutes and then it goes for 15 minutes and then 20.
Oh, dude. I saw the Disco Volante. They would come out on the Disco Volante tour and be pretty confrontational. And you get people and they're like, play something. And they eventually
play
did
anything.
They would spend 15 minutes of just noise and stuff. And we were into it at the time. I was sort of woke to their style of Disco Volante had gotten into us. And so we were cool with it at the time, being 16 years old in the audience, but they still played all their tunes from Disco Volante, or most of them.
Yeah. Oh,
did you remember what you were going to say?
Yeah.
You forgot what you were going to say. You didn't remember.
No, I'm just fried.
Yeah, dude, I feel you.
I know what it was. It was back to the reason I brought the Invincible Czars and Josh, because he's been doing some of that kind of stuff with Patreon and stuff, where he'll show the charts, because just writing out charts and doing film music and all that, and kind of show that and the thought process and the revisions, and it is kind of a neat thing if you're into it, So it does sound like, cool, especially with your fan base would be.
Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely going in that direction because, the record, you might get a couple thousand people to buy a record, and that's not going to do anything. But if you can get people interested,
a couple of thousand, that's a dream to me.
Oh, I know that would be good for us. So I don't know how many we've sold of High Castle so far. We have hundreds of people buying them, but that's about it. But getting on a label, and apparently this label is really good with digital marketing, and they can use all our names and band affiliations and get into the right algorithms on
that's what it's
Facebook
all about,
marketing. And for a non-live playing band, that's going to be our only hope. But we do have I touched upon, a lot of the subjects of some of these things that I could probably talk for days about, that I feel like we could come up with these independent streams all within this channel that you kind of go into, and you could learn from the beginning. I might do one where I pretend you know nothing about the harmonic series, and you just start, what's a harmonic, and blah blah blah, and then you go through the math. But I could keep going it to all the more color spectrum stuff, and then there's the more practical production stuff. So
that'd be
killer.
I think
I've got
awesome,
enough stuff where I could and just, I don't know, make it $5 a month or something. I don't know if I want to do all these tiers and I'll sign a thing and send it to you.
Keep it simple.
If you pay $10.
Keep
and
simple.
We'll see.
You should.
I feel if someone. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say you could do small clips, put them on YouTube, and then point them to Patreon.
That's exactly what I would do. I would put teasers on YouTube and then say, if you want the real deal, Yep. So a lot of stuff happening. Just kind of trying to balance that with my regular life. That's the hard part. Because eventually, if I could, that would take a lot, if I were to actually not to phase out my other work and devote 3 days a week toward producing content, I would do that, but I would need to get, a couple thousand, 2,000 subscribers before that would have, I don't know what the number is, but it's something like that. So, so slow build to that, where I don't want to have people paying a high price and then me being pressured to produce content that's,
well, that's like you said, if you keep it simple and low and you just kind of start out, and as it over time, you can kind of, okay, now I've got enough the existing stuff, but there's no pressure to try to like make it happen right at,
absolutely,
non-realistically right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally, man.
Dude, that's awesome, man. It's been really cool talking to you, Tim.
I know. I started a lot of tangential stuff, but at least it kind of dropped some seeds that we could talk about some of this stuff further. If you ever wanted to focus on one particular subject, then, we could do that. I kind of like just getting tangential sometimes. So,
man, that's what it's all about.
Like,
that's what's cool about this. There's no like let it roll, let it flow. Just see where the conversation takes you. I mean, sometimes it's, porno and fart jokes, and other times it's actual serious music, whatever.
Pythagorean harmonies. Yep.
Yeah. So it's actually nice to have a very intelligent, adult grown up conversation about these things. I appreciate it.
It is
your
cool,
time.
man. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm happy you guys had me, and any other time. I'll send you over, some links to the to all the High Castle stuff, and you can share it here.
Cool. We'll
just
post
so you
some stuff.
just so you can get in some of that in your head, some of the stuff we're talking about, the aesthetic production stuff, and then some of the chord stuff in the zip files too. There will be the chord progressions and stuff, so you can kind of check out and be like, oh, that's what he was talking about.
Dude, that's awesome. Absolutely. Man.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, very cool, dude.
Yeah, I'll send it over to you maybe later tonight. If I forget, just drop me a message and remind me, because my to-do list is just stupid. Like I'm constantly, I'm sure we're all like that, but it's just, feel like I'm constantly like dying beneath the weight of my stupid to-do list.
Dude, this is my life too. Like, it's just horrible time management on top of it. Like, I have 20 things to do. What you learn and but somehow you never do quite get there. And it's like making an album, right? You're like, anything, it's like, all right, cool. I can get this done. And then like 2 weeks later, that one thing is finally done, right? It's like, I'm constantly just like, it's like 50 fucking things that I'm trying to like,
totally,
chisel away at, so I get that, man. And then we started a podcast on top of it. God damn it.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Well, it's good to get to know you a little bit. I've seen you. I think we're only. I tend to press friend if someone has a bunch of mutual friends, because I use Facebook mostly as like putting my music out, less for personal stuff. So
for sure.
I tend to just friend request whoever. Oh, he's friends with those guys. Cool. Like, that's, I think, how I friend requested you.
It was awesome, man. And just about you were talking about the Estradasphere group that I don't know if you created that or something. And
I was one of the fans of Estradasphere. I think it had already been there, but I decided, why don't we blow this thing up? Because you know how Facebook is on the official pages. They unless you pay for the advertising, nobody sees the post.
That's what I've been
telling. But on the fan pages,
totally.
On the fan pages, there's still people see them, and I was like, that might be the only way right now.
Yeah, and that's where I met all these people, like meeting you, in that kind of capacity, meeting Caitlin, meeting all these different. I know so many people that I've met just through these groups that are into this.
It's a cool little network.
It's
a shame the world's so disconnected right now that can't all hang out in a room. But we all live in different spots. But man, maybe if you're ever in the Denver area, if I'm ever in Austin, I will surely let you know.
Yeah, dude. Well, I'm hoping to fucking tour again next year, man. And hopefully with the Czars, man. Hopefully we'll know, roll
man.
through, dude.
I'll be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Crash on my basement floor if you want.
Pick your brain. Stay up all night drinking beer, talking about harmonic series.
Hey, why not?
Total nerd why not? Shit. All right, dude. Tim Smolens,
all right, dude,
everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so online, tell us where's the best place to find you. Just where should people look for the specific stuff you want them to find?
TimSmolens.com, and then there's High Castle Teleorkestra, which is like TELEORKESTRA.com.
Okay.
Then there's Facebook pages for Estradasphere, like, so whatever the mailing lists on the either my page or the High Castle page. High Castle's where everything I am doing is really going on right now. That's the coolest thing I got going on. That's what I'd recommend. Is
cool.
It's the musicians are unbelievable. The tunes are turning out awesome, and I'm just super stoked on it.
Killer, man. Well, thanks for joining us, dude. Really a pleasure to talk to you. Hang tight, just so we make sure this uploads. We're going to sign off. Once again, it's been Skunk Manhattan, Victor Ramos with Tim Smolens, and we'll see you next time. Later.
Thanks, guys.